In the shadowy world of espionage, there are spies. And then there are legends. This is the story of a man who deceived one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world. A man who lived a double life, feeding secrets to the British while sitting at the very heart of Soviet power. His name is Oleg Gordievsky, but this isn't just a tale of spying. It's a story of betrayal, trust, and survival against all odds. He knew the risks. He knew what would happen if he was caught. And yet, he played the game anyway. What drives a man to betray his country? And how did he manage to escape the clutches of the ruthless KGB when the walls began closing in? You're about to uncover the gripping story of the double agent who became one of Britain's greatest Cold War assets. A man whose daring escape from the jaws of death became the stuff of legend. This is the tale of Oleg Gordievsky, the spy who narrowly escaped execution. How did he do it? And what really happened in those final moments when he faced death? Let's find out. Oleg Gordievsky was born in Moscow in 1938, in the heart of the Soviet Union. From a young age, his future seemed destined. His father was a devoted officer in the KGB, and so was his older brother. It was no surprise when Oleg followed in their footsteps, joining the KGB in the early 1960s. The KGB was the Soviet Union's fearsome intelligence agency, known for its ruthless methods and extensive spy network. By joining the KGB, Gordievsky entered a world shrouded in secrecy, suspicion, and fear, but even in his early days, Gordievsky was different. Unlike many of his colleagues, he wasn't fully committed to the Soviet ideology. Living in a country gripped by authoritarian control, he began questioning the oppressive regime he served. In 1966, Gordievsky was posted to Copenhagen, Denmark. This was where his life would change forever. Being outside the iron grip of the Soviet Union opened his eyes to Western freedoms, culture, and democracy. For the first time, he saw what life could be like without Soviet control. Seeds of doubt were planted in his mind. What no one knew at the time was that these seeds would grow into something dangerous, a burning desire to undermine the Soviet Union from within. In the early 1970s, during a second posting to Denmark, Gordievsky caught the attention of British intelligence, MI6. They saw potential in him, recognizing his growing disillusionment with the Soviet regime. It was during this time that they made their move. Imagine this moment, a brief encounter in a quiet corner of Copenhagen, where a British intelligence officer reached out to Gordievsky, offering him the chance to make a difference. The decision weighed heavily on him. If he accepted, there would be no turning back. He would become a traitor in the eyes of the KGB, a man marked for death. In 1974, Gordievsky made his decision. He secretly began working for MI6, passing valuable information to the British while maintaining his cover as a loyal KGB officer. He played a dangerous double game, fooling his superiors while feeding intelligence that would shape the course of the Cold War, but it wasn't just information that Gordievsky provided. His insights into Soviet thinking were critical. He revealed details about KGB operations, Soviet infiltration tactics, and even the mindset of the Kremlin leadership. This was gold dust to the British, but as his position within the KGB rose, so did the risks. By the 1980s, Oleg Gordievsky had become one of the KGB's most trusted officers. In 1982, he was appointed the KGB's top officer in London. He was now at the center of Soviet espionage in the West, holding a powerful position. But little did the KGB know, their most important man in London was secretly working for the enemy. This was a dangerous game. Gordievsky's success as a double agent depended on his ability to outsmart everyone around him. He lived a life of constant paranoia, knowing that one small slip could lead to his capture and certain death. Despite the pressure, Gordievsky continued to provide vital information. He played a key role in helping Western governments understand the Soviet mindset during critical moments, such as the escalating tensions between East and West in the early 1980s, but the walls were closing in. The KGB was always suspicious, always on the lookout for traitors. They didn't know it was Gordievsky, but they could sense something was wrong. The slightest hint of betrayal would lead to interrogation, torture, and likely execution, and then it happened. In 1985, Gordievsky was suddenly summoned back to Moscow. The summons was unexpected and ominous, a sign that his cover may have been blown. When Gordievsky arrived in Moscow, he was taken to a remote dacha outside the city. There, KGB officers confronted him, accusing him of being a traitor. They didn't have solid evidence, but their suspicions were strong enough to warrant a brutal interrogation. For days, Gordievsky was grilled, drugged, and psychologically tortured. The KGB was desperate to break him, to make him confess. But Gordievsky knew that a confession would mean death. He held his ground, denying all accusations, even as he was pushed to the brink. It was a terrifying moment, a moment where everything seemed lost. But despite the pressure, Gordievsky managed to convince the KGB that he was innocent. They couldn't get the confession they wanted, so they decided to keep him under strict surveillance instead. The situation was dire. Gordievsky was now a marked man in Moscow, watched closely by the very people he had betrayed. There was only one way out, an escape plan that MI6 had prepared for years, codenamed Operation Pimlico. The escape plan was a closely guarded secret. MI6 had a contingency in place for this exact scenario, a way to extract Gordievsky from under the noses of the KGB if things ever went south. But executing it was another matter entirely. Here's how it worked. Gordievsky had to give MI6 a signal. He needed to go to a specific location in Moscow and stand in a particular way while holding a Safeway shopping bag. This would alert MI6 that he was in trouble and needed to be extracted. The signal was received, and the escape plan was put into motion. Gordievsky's instructions were clear. He had to travel secretly to a remote location near the Finnish border, avoiding all KGB surveillance. Once there, MI6 agents would smuggle him across the border, hidden in a secret compartment of a car. The journey was harrowing. Gordievsky had to remain hidden, avoiding KGB checkpoints and patrols. At any moment, he could be discovered and arrested. His fate hung by a thread. As he neared the border, the tension was unbearable. There was no room for error. But against all odds, Gordievsky made it. He crossed into Finland and was whisked away to safety. He was now free from the grip of the Soviet Union and free from certain execution. After his daring escape, Oleg Gordievsky was given asylum in the United Kingdom. But his life was never the same. He lived in constant fear of assassination by the KGB, always looking over his shoulder. The Soviet Union declared him a traitor and sentenced him to death in absentia. He became one of the most wanted men in the world. Despite the risks, Gordievsky's work was far from over. He continued to assist Western intelligence agencies, providing insights into Soviet operations. His information was so valuable that it shaped major political decisions during the final years of the Cold War, but even in safety, the threat was real. The KGB never forgot his betrayal. They made several attempts to locate and assassinate him. Gordievsky's life was one of isolation, never knowing if a shadowy figure was waiting around the corner to silence him forever. Oleg Gordievsky's story is one of incredible courage, deception, and survival. He played a game where the stakes were life and death, and he won. But it came at a cost, a life lived in fear, cut off from his homeland, always under threat.